Welcome, Professor Raghavan. We have just started the broadcast and we'll start exactly at 3 o'clock, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, very good evening to one and all. I am Dr. B.M. Meera, former librarian, Raman Research Institute, Bangalore. I am privileged and honored to anchor this inaugural evening of Library Technology Conclave, LTC 2021. A few basic guidelines to the audience as we are having this program as a webinar. Please mute your audio always on your Zoom screen. Unmute when you are called upon to speak. Click on the raise your hands icon to let us know that you want to ask a question. Use Q&A icon only to message your question. Please avoid sending greetings and messages through the chat box. Thank you for joining us at LTC 2021 inaugural function. Let us begin the conclave show right now. After a series of pre-conclave webinars and workshops in the last 2 months, the 5th Library Technology Conclave is all set for its final 4 days program starting from today, the inaugural day of the conclave. The theme of the conclave, which you all are well aware, is International Conclave on eScience and Digital Libraries, Building Communities for Collaboration. Library Technology Conclave was conceived and started by Informatics India Limited, Bangalore in 2016 as an annual event. LTC 2021 is co-hosted jointly by Informatics India Limited along with CSIR 4th Paradigm Institute, National Institute of Advanced Studies, and Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, all located in Bangalore. I now invite Mr. N.V. Satyanarayana, the Conclave Chair of LTC 2021 and CMD of Informatics, who is also credited as a pioneer in introducing and popularizing online access to information to the scholarly community in India during 1980s, much before the internet era, for his welcome address. Over to Satya.
Good afternoon, friends, and greetings of the Republic Day celebrations to all of you that just passed. My warm welcome to you all to this much awaited inaugural function of the Library Technology Conclave, LTC 2021. It is much awaited because we had a series of pre-conclave programs and workshops beginning early November last year with a brilliant curtain rise talk by Professor Samir Brahmachari, former Director General of CSIR, setting the tone for the whole conclave to culminate in a grand finale of 4 days beginning today. We are very happy and fortunate to have two most distinguished guests with us today for the inaugural program, whose presence itself has made the conclave complete for the theme set for the conclave, that is eScience and Digital Libraries, Building Communities for Collaboration. Friends, the conclave will be inaugurated soon by Dr. K. Vijay Raghavan, a highly distinguished and accomplished scientist of the country. He is a fellow of the Royal Society and the proud recipient of 3 prestigious awards, Padma Shri, Bhatnagar, and Infosys Laureate. Developmental genetics is his specialization. National Center for Biological Sciences, NCBS in Bangalore, is his home base, where he was the director and continues his research there as emeritus professor. More importantly, friends, he had the eyes and ears of the Prime Minister in his current role as the principal scientific advisor to the Government of India. We are so lucky, sir, that we could secure a bit of your precious time. We are highly thankful to you, sir, for being with us to inaugurate this conclave. My hearty welcome to you. The scholarly community and the libraries are enthusiastically looking for the one nation, one subscription model, an idea being driven through your new science, technology, and innovation policy, STPI. It will be a transformational change in access to global journal literature for the Indian researchers. Open access movement, as you know, is currently moving more than 50% published content to open access. Being in the space for the last 40 years, I personally hope that the impact of fast accelerating open access movement in the world is looked into while implementing this one nation, one subscription model. Once again, our hearty welcome to you, sir, and a big thank you for honoring our invitation to this inaugural function. Professor Tony Hay, Anthony John Grenville Hay, his full name. Our next distinguished guest is the conclave. He is the conclave keynote speaker. I owe a special thanks to you, Professor Hay, for good reason. You are the inspiration for the theme of our conclave, eScience. I got to know about you first when I went through the famous book Fourth Paradigm, edited by you in 2019. When we were thinking about this area as the theme of our conclave, I found a paper by you on eScience and its implication for the library community, published in Library High Tech. I said to myself then, how wonderful it would be to have you deliver the conclave keynote. We are so excited that you are with us today. Friends, Professor Hay is not from the library science profession. He is a distinguished theoretical physicist who worked closely with two famous Nobel laureates in theoretical physics, that is Richard Feynman and Murray Gell-Mann. Later, he switched to computational sciences. He led the UK's eScience program between 2001 and 2005, and later moved to Microsoft, heading their corporate research. Currently, Professor Hay is associated with the Science and Technology Facilitation Council as part of UK's research and innovation as chief data scientist. My hearty welcome to you, Professor Hay, and thank you for accepting our invitation. LTC 21, by its model, is a collaborative initiative. Since its beginning, we have been organizing this annual event as a joint program with an academic, research, or corporate organization having common interest in the theme of the conclave. For the events of the past years, we had the privilege of partnering with TCS Pune, Goa University, and Cochin University of Science and Technology. LTC 21 is extremely fortunate to have three partner organizations this year, whom I would like to introduce quickly. The National Institute of Advanced Studies, NIAS, in Bangalore is our first conclave partner to come on board. The discussion started with NIAS in January last year to have this program in their auditorium in May. COVID situation forced us to put off the event incidentally to finally become a webinar series, which you are witnessing today. Dr. Shailesh Nayak, the director of the NIAS, that's the National Institute of Advanced Studies, who is with us today, is a distinguished geoscientist who also served as the Secretary, Ministry of Earth Sciences for 7 years. Thank you, Dr. Nayak, for partnering with us and your wholehearted support for the success of this event. My warm welcome to you, sir. Professor Sai Baba, TV Raman Pai Chair, Professor at NIAS, and our conclave co-chair, and Ms. Hamsa Kalyani, the librarian of NIAS, who is closely working with conclave team, are also with us. My hearty welcome to you both. Health informatics is a fast advancing discipline. Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, we call RGUHS, in Bangalore, who are establishing a Center for Health Informatics, were happy to join us as conclave partners when we approached them. We have with us Dr. Sachidanand, Vice Chancellor of the university, who took keen interest in this conclave theme. He is a dermatologist specializing in cosmetic surgery. He has a distinguished record of many outstanding career accomplishments as teacher, medical practitioner, and health administrator. A very busy person as he is also the chairman of the task force on manpower and training for COVID-19 scenario in Karnataka. We are very fortunate to steal his time to be with us today. My very warm welcome to you, sir. We also have Dr. Sidmalaya, the co-chair of the LTC 2021 and the former consulting librarian of RGHS, under whose advice and direction Rajiv Gandhi University initiated the creation of the Center for Health Informatics. My warm welcome to you, Dr. Sidmalaya. CSIR Fourth Paradigm Institute in Bangalore became a natural choice for us, their institute being its name and activity stands for eScience. Dr. Vidyadhar Mutkavi, who is heading CSR 4th Paradigm Institute, is obviously the most valuable partner in the event. He is also the co-chair of the Conclave, a person who is always ready to help in making this event a success. Thank you, Dr. Mutkavi, for your support since we met virtually. My warm welcome to you. The strength and value of the event is in the content of the program. Professor Shalini Aras, the program chair of the conclave, who has taken endless pains to put together the whole program, is with us. She is a multifaceted academic specializing in information science and management. I worked closely with her in the initial phase of setting up International School of Information Management, the only high school in India it was. Thank you, Shalini, for putting together a rich content package of involving 40 international and local experts on the conclave team. A very happy and welcome to you on behalf of the organizing partners and, and also on my personal behalf. My warm welcome to all speakers, panelists, anchors, and the discussants. I would also like to thank Dr. Anand, who is the chair of Informatics Innovation Award, which is instituted by us, which will be announced during the last day of the conclave, where we have a session on case studies in innovation. Along with Dr. Anand Bhairappa, I also welcome the jury team of the conclave, Dr. Rama Patnaik from IIM Bangalore, Professor Sri Kumar from IIM Kozhikode, Dr. Nagan Gowda from former NAL, and Dr. Gopakumar from Librarian Goa University. The major credit of LTC 2021 goes to a small core team of a dozen, which has been working in making this event happen. My special personal welcome to all of them. I'm extremely happy and excited that the conclave started with more than 1,200 registrations. You are all virtual to me. You can see me, but I can't see the not so happy part of this inevitable virtual model of the day. I extend my warm welcome to you, all the delegates. A few words about informatics, the company I'm still wedded to for the last 4 decades. This LTC was planned to coincide with the completion of 40 years of informatics in May 2020. It's a 40 years of long, challenging journey. I don't feel comfortable to talk about our company to pat my back as it is for others to do. However, on occasion like this, a brief view is important to showcase our achievements. We are a pre-internet online company. As we began promoting the idea of instant online access to information to the scholarly and library community of India beginning mid-90s. We also pioneered the work from home practice in early 90s for very large indexing projects managed by us involving several people, all working from home, connected to servers in our office through telephone-based slow data network in those days. Today, we build large-scale data products. A product we feel very proud to talk about is JGate, the most comprehensive e-journal database in the world, which indexes all published articles in all peer-reviewed journals in English language, about 54,000 of them, harvesting and indexing 3 million plus records every year. The product initially funded by DSIR in 2001 as a pilot project for 5 institutes is used by all major higher education and research institutions in the country. The product gets customized to local institutions' discovery needs, facilitating resource sharing with a group of institutions like CSIR, ICAR, University Group, etc. Friends, COVID time was a hard time as much for us as it is for all of you. I request all of you to stay safe and cautious. With many vaccines in the scene now, good times are ahead. Once again, I welcome you all and thank you for joining us.
Okay, well, the time has now come to inaugurate LTC 2021. To do this honor and deliver inaugural address, we have with us Dr. Vijay Raghavan, Scientific Advisor to Government of India. Sir, I request you to inaugurate the conclave by lighting the lamp and with your address, inaugural address.
Thank you very much. Let me just click on the lamp, which I've done. So I think we can consider this inaugurated. And if I may, let me start with my address. Dennis, you could remove the screen share now. Good. Thank you very much, Dr. Meera, for that, for kicking off the show. It's very valuable to hear from you, as also from Dr. Satyanarayana about the purpose of this conclave. It's good to see our colleagues and friends here, Dr. Shailesh Nayak, Professor Tony Hay, Dr. Sai Baba, and everyone else. This is a very important time for us to look at how information is collected, collated, and made accessible. And let me very briefly, without getting into too much detail, summarize what I think are the challenges and perhaps the routes out of these challenges we face today. And people who are here, experts, will have much deeper and clearer views on it, and I'm looking forward to hear what Professor Tony Hay has to say. Fundamentally, we are at a situation today where information is increasingly becoming the source of rather polarized power. Knowledge and power have always gone together in human history, and access to knowledge has meant access to power. But in today's information age, the sharpness of the divide has increased enormously. Those who have access to the analysis of data can wield disproportionate power, and therefore we need to address how the rest of us should and can and must deal with that going forward. So let me summarize three different aspects of this concern. One, the relatively still backwaters of concerns about scientific publishing and scientists. These are very important topics for all of us as scientists, but they may not necessarily be ones which stir people outside. And second is the aspect which stirs people outside through big industry and what they do with these kinds of data. And finally, how they impact on people at variety of levels and what can people do about it. Now, first of all, let's take scientific publishing. Much of what we see in scientific publishing, even today, is a relic of the onset of the printing press. And therefore, those who could print were people who collected knowledge, filtered it, made it printable, brought out at great expense these printed documents and journals, and made them available. And of course, since a lot of effort went into developing quality documents, referring them, making sure that they're available, the net result was that the printed copy was expensive. For the printed copy to be accessible to a large number of people, we had libraries. Libraries subscribed to these copies and allowed you to walk into the library, sit down, and read it. If you wanted to take these journal volumes or articles home, you could borrow from the library, and for that you had to be a member of an institution or a member of the library, or later on, they could be photocopied. But photocopying has the danger that they could also subsequently be photocopied, and therefore publishers again stepped in and found ways to charge for photocopy. This went on, and this went on in a manner which was parallel to the industrial scale development of science. Science in the late 19th century and in the 20th century was literally a gentleman's enterprise with institutions playing roles merely to host these people who are talented to pursue their interests in exploring the nature of the world around them, understanding it and changing it. This has changed inexorably, steadily, beginning substantially at during the post-Second World War period, where major scientific institutions were started all over the world, including India, and science became very deeply connected with technology, and technology much more deeply connected with the growth of economies, and a feedback loop of various kinds moved the earlier industrial revolutions into speedier and speedier changes. The net result of this has been of two kinds. One, through the development and use of technology, through information in various ways, we have changed the world around us in extraordinary ways. We have moved from a situation where our purpose in understanding nature was to survive on this planet and to get benefit by putting barriers to the problems nature had for our growth and development, to a situation where we have exploited the planet to such an extent that the entire future of the planet depends on us. We are no longer objects painted on the canvas of Earth, but we wield the paintbrush. And therefore, the entire future of the planet, which we can see through the consequences on climate change, biodiversity, the way our habitats are, all of this depends on us. And science, technology, and innovation plays a great part, both in what has happened and how we will be rescued from this. But while all this is going on, there's been another sea change, and that's in the information industry. Information, which was analyzed and key to all of this, as I've mentioned earlier, that is, it's not just our abilities as biological organisms, as animals, who have extraordinary capabilities, such as language and our ability to oppose thumb and forefinger, but we have transcended the restraints of natural selection and evolution and gone into cultural evolution as the principal mode of change through our societies, through our language, through our literature, through our information processing systems. And we can see all that in what we see in what is broadly called the structures of artificial intelligence and their consequences on us. So we have changed the planet in extraordinary ways, and we seem to be poised to change it much more in ways which are anchored on information. Now, the anchoring of information, as driven by what is broadly called artificial intelligence, is at its core based on something which says that the agnostic to context analysis of data in huge ways, combined with a deep understanding of specific disciplines, can lead to decision-making across areas of work in a manner which the human mind is perhaps unable to deal with in any specific case. It is still true that artificial general intelligence is not yet feasible, but a narrower definition of artificial intelligence is increasingly becoming applicable and feasible in many specific areas. Now, this does not mean that our understanding of specific disciplines, a pathologist or an astronomer is not necessary. They will be necessary and very valuable, but increasingly a combination of deep understanding and the analysis of information will give you advice, which is good. You will get excellent advice on what to do, where to go, what kind of job to take, who your partner should be, whether you'll succeed or not. This will be basically astrology with content. And this is going to be a big challenge, because if many of the things which you are doing or you're supposed to do comes with robust advice, what is the role for us as individuals? In many of the things we already do, we get advice from the internet. When we want to buy something to eat, if you can afford a smartphone, you actually look at various places, but you're also bombarded with suggestions depending on your taste, your past purchases, and so on and so forth. So there is a feeling, partly true, partly a worry, and partly a fear of the future, that you're going to have a situation where the future is dictated by others. In that situation, coming back to this aspect of scientific publishing, and I'd like to end here, is an enormous challenge. Because of the vestiges of print publishing, global publishers have hung on to that till recently, and they're changing now, in a manner where subscriptions and restricted access dominate the landscape. In India, for example, the total number of subscription fees paid to scientific journals is enormous. It runs into hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And this is something which is not good for two reasons. One, despite this enormous subscription, access is not uniformly available across the scientific community. Secondly, access to all our citizens should be available because internet publishing today doesn't in any way increase the cost. So if you pay a certain subscription rate, it should be that same subscription rate for all of India. Now, publishers have gotten around this by trying to pull the carpet from under this argument by saying, okay, we will make everything accessible at low or no subscription fees. We will move towards complete open access, but you should pay an exorbitant price for wanting to publish in our journals. We will pay this exorbitant price because we will have access to the best referees, and we have a totem pole of value attached to information. And if you want to publish in places of the highest value, you will have to pay the highest amount. Let's say, as people have speculated or argued from information coming out, to publish an article which is accepted in Nature will cost you something from $5,000 to $10,000. Now, both of these approaches are untenable in large economies such as India, where there is a requirement for a huge young demography to come up using the tools of science and technology. And if information is to be distributed, an opportunity to be democratically available, both the access to information and the access to be able to publish your information without having extortionary fees being paid is something which needs to be addressed. How can we address that is a challenge. Many people have proposed specific kinds of solutions, but fundamentally the solution which assumes that these structures are permanent and somehow one has to support them is, in my opinion, not correct. Yet, we need to have structures which, when these structures are removed, still allow the access to information and the high quality review of information. And that is the principal challenge we face as scientists, as librarians, as people who purvey information to the world, and people who assist people to make decisions based on information. I'd like to end by saying that if you are a citizen, a farmer, or a patient who's going to see a doctor, you should have access to the latest scientific information of every kind, both in its raw manner as well as annotated and in a reliable manner. So that's a big challenge. You should have it accessible bilingually in English and in your native language. And as an individual researcher, as an institution or groups of institutions, you should have the flexibility to disseminate this in a manner which, again, is reviewed well. This is the greatest challenge we have. And by clinging to publishing structures of the time of Gutenberg, we cannot solve this problem. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you very much for a very thought-provoking inaugural address and thereby opening the conclave for deliberations for the next 3 days. You have very aptly covered the various aspects of complexities associated with scholarly communication. Now, friends, the National Institute of Advanced Studies, NIAS, is a prestigious multidisciplinary research institute in Bangalore that looks at science and technology through the lens of society. NIAS is one of the co-hosts of LTC 2021, which was originally planned to be held at NIAS Auditorium last year, but due to disruption of COVID-19, we were unable to do it. Dr. Shailesh Nayak, an eminent geoscientist and the director of NIAS, is with us to address the gathering and to share his thoughts about the conclave. May I call upon you, sir, to hear about NIAS and your thoughts on the theme of the conclave. Over to Dr. Shailesh Nayak.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vijay Raghavan, Principal Scientific Advisor to the Prime Minister, and Dr. Tony Hay from the Science and Technology Facilities Council of UK. And this, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you very much for joining this and all the participants. The topic of this today's webinar is very critical, and today is the time.
Can I just use this break to say that I will have to log off now, but I will come back a little later and listen to the recordings and listen to Shailesh and others, and also to Tony. But thank you very much.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Good afternoon to everyone. Very happy to organize at the appropriate time. And because this is one of the very important topic which is being discussed as a part of the draft Science, Technology and Innovation Policy, which is recently announced by Department of Science and Technology.
Hello.
As far as NIAS is concerned, also this is equally important, because we are looking of some of the issues from an inequality point of view. And if you do not have the access of the information or a knowledge to everyone, you creating some kind of an inequality, maybe you call a digital inequality or a knowledge inequality between different people. So I think the providing access of the knowledge, and essentially which is the research which is generated by the public funds, it is a duty and responsibility that the access to such information or output or the products or the services is available to everyone. At the same time, we also need to ensure that there is some kind of an interaction between the generator of this knowledge or a producer of this outputs and services and the users of the services. And that is where I think NIAS comes into picture, where we try to use by using science and technology. So I think the basic idea in this, I think, is very important, that it should be basically the community which is at stakes, maybe people. Vijay mentioned very articulate well about the industry and people and many others who would be using this knowledge. And the idea of which Vijay also mentioned about one nation, one subscription. I think this is one which is need to be further pursued and identify how this is to be done. You also have to see from the other angle that the researchers who spend their time and energy on carrying out research, and when the output also, they've been asked to provide the money or funds to publish those things. So I think there is somewhere something is wrong, and I think we need to correct this. And I think this webinar, I think this is one issue which will be also debated. I would also like to recollect about the almost in 90s, the network, the Information and Library Network, net as it was known, is one of the earlier where they tried to provide information to across all universities, and it has a repository of all the theses and hundreds of journal subscription and lakhs of books, e-books available on this. I think they have also software and all. I think this also is a kind of an initiative which we need to see that how this can be further upgraded. And I think as the information and data is growing manifold, and one estimate says that almost every year we grow by almost 25 to 30%. And this is a huge information which is being generated. I think the existing ways and means of how the data is being stored is also very critical. And now, as we know that there is a new moving over to what we call as a object storage, which will be, the data would be managed as an object, not as a files or a block of files, which we used to do all these years. And this is, I think, a very promising, because it can have both structured and unstructured data. And also it would have a metadata as well as the unique identification number. So this could be very easily retrieved. I think this this will allow us a very high scalability, a quick retrieval, and what kind of a technology which is used for the analytics. So I think we are at a very crossroads of a lot of information, a lot of new technologies, as well as the need to provide the knowledge to the every community of the society. So in this regard, I must compliment Dr. Satyanarayana on holding this kind of a conferences. And I'm sure that the present webinar which is being organized, many of these issues will be discussed and provide the recommendation to take this forward. So thank you very much. And I would also like to thank my all co-hosts to support this activity. Thank you.
Sir, thank you very much for your stimulating address. It was a great pleasure to hear your address. CSIR 4th Paradigm Institute, as a co-host of the Conclave, is the closest partner to the theme of this conclave by the very nature of its activities. Dr. Vidyadhar Mudkavi, Director, CSIR 4th Paradigm Institute, is also a co-chair of the conclave. As a member of the core team of this conclave, I am privileged to have worked closely with him in planning this conclave. May I now call upon Dr. Mudkavi. Sir, the audience are keen to hear about your institute and your thoughts about the conclave. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You're audible.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a network connectivity for all the things at this time. Yeah, so let me try my best to say a few words. And if I get disconnected, I would request you to please go ahead, because I have a network issue. It seems to be not in our institute, but elsewhere. Anyway, okay, thank you very much for inviting me to say a few words about my institute. Professor Vijay Raghavan, Professor Tony Hay, and others. My pleasure to be here. Our institute was called the Center for Mathematical Modeling and Compute Simulation, as part of a center in CSIR system, established back in 1988. It was a visionary step at that time, because if you recall, around 1988 or so, the supercomputing was barely 300 or so gigaflops, not even teraflops. So the CSIR saw a need for computational sciences as a major thrust in scientific discovery. We have, of course, come a long way from 1988. And it was interesting that when the book by Professor Tony Hay came out, The Fourth Paradigm, the very same book was discussed in the SAC PM, Scientific Advisory Committee of PM, by none other than R.A. Mashelkar. And they thought it was high time that CSIR took the next step to be able to make some inroads into data sciences, by virtue of which, actually, back in 2013, after a lot of deliberation, CSIR CMAX, the Center for Mathematical Modeling Computers.
Mira, as he had suggested, you go ahead. I think he had earlier.
Yeah, can I call upon Dr. Sachidanand now?
Yes, he's available very much here.
Is he available?
Yes.
He's
Okay.
hello, doctor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah. So, Meera, you can call upon him.
Yeah, sure. Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences is another prestigious co-host of this conclave. Dear participants of the conclave, we will now hear the address by Dr. S. Sachidanand, Vice Chancellor, RGUHS, who is a well-known teacher and also a very well-known practitioner in dermatology. Sir, the virtual floor is yours now.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon to one and all. It's been a pleasure to be a part of this LTC 2021. I'm very happy that we have associated with the other three partners. One is informatics, then NIS, National Institute of Advanced Sciences, CSIR, Fourth Paradigm, and Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences. It's been a long wait because we had this curtain raisers almost 2 months ago, and we had heard the doyens in this field who have given a lot of information regarding the data sciences and the way in which technology has helped us to progress in our field. Today, health informatics is a spectrum of multidisciplinary fields that includes study of the design, development, and application of computational innovations to improve healthcare. The disciplines involved combines the fields of medicine with the computing fields, in particular computer engineering, software engineering, information engineering, neuroinformatics, bio-inspired computing, theoretical computer science, information science, data science, and many other such things. Of course, in academic institutions, medical informatics, research focus on applications of artificial intelligence in healthcare and designing medical devices based on embedded systems is of utmost importance. Medical informatics also includes modern applications of neuroinformatics and cognitive informatics in the fields of brain mapping and emulation. In some countries, term informatics is also used in the context of applying library science to data management in hospitals. According to some journal of biomedical informatics, cognitive informatics is a burgeoning interdisciplinary domain comprising the cognitive and information sciences that focuses on human information processing, mechanisms and processes within the context of computing and computing applications. Broadly speaking, we have three components in health informatics: the health science or its subdisciplines as primary domain, and information science, which deals with the content development and management aspect of health science information, which could be simple textbooks to journals, to patient records, radiological images, clinical protocols, surgical procedures, drug discovery related data. It's a huge data that we accumulate. Computational sciences extensively used in handling a variety of health information. And medical imaging computing and image informatics, cognitive informatics and artificial intelligence in healthcare has been the focus. Neuroinformatics in healthcare, scientific study of information flow and processing in nervous system, includes subspecialties like brain mapping and simulation, mind uploading, etc. Then medical signaling process, computer engineering in healthcare, which covers medical robotics, telehealth and telemedicine, etc. Archival science and databases in healthcare, involving databases like JGate and Medline, to which informatics is providing us. Data science and knowledge representation in healthcare, which covers clinical research informatics, translational bioinformatics like gene mapping, etc. So with all this, Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences is very happy to associate with informatics and the other two partners in participating in this Conclave 2021, LTC 2021, which itself has opened up new vistas for younger minds and youngsters to participate and learn a lot from the experts. I congratulate informatics for organizing this whole program, very informative and educative program to the masses. I'm sure the entire library sciences people would benefit from this, and we feel proud to be associated. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you, Dr. Khan.
Sir, thank you very much for the thought-provoking address and your well wishes. Glad to hear that eScience initiatives will be taking roots in your university through your new Center for Health Informatics. Now, Dr. Shalini R. Aras, Program Chair, LTC 2021, and Founder, Chairperson, Myra School of Business, has been steering the program right from day one. I am proud to say that Dr. Shalini is my teacher and mentor at the Library School, University of Mysore, way back in early 1980s. An internationally recognized academician, Dr. Shalini is a pioneer in the field of digital libraries through Vidyanidhi Digital Library Project, initiated by her way back in the year 2000. She's the first to start an iSchool, namely International School of Information Management at Mysore in India in the year 2005 through seed funding from the Ford Foundation and Informatics India Limited. Madam, I welcome you to give a brief account of the conclave.
Thank you, Meera. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to Professor Tony Hay and also others in those regions. I think I saw Arna Kushma there. So, and also good evening to some of the people who are there down under. The journey of the Conclave LTC 2021 on eScience and digital libraries has been a long one, because when Satya and I were discussing and planning this event, it was actually before BC, that is before Corona. I guess it was sometime in August 2019. And I'm not too sure how we arrived at this theme, eScience and digital libraries. But very early in the beginning, we said this is the theme of the conference. But I'm surprised that we very rarely, Satya and I very rarely agree upon things very easily. And we did agree upon the theme of the conference very early. In a sense, I would say on hindsight, it appears to be prescient that we chose this theme, eScience and digital library, because the Corona pandemic has not only brought the science to center stage, but also the essence of eScience, that is that of collaboration at the global level and the networked science as it is known as. As they say, many crises actually bring out something good or even great. Because despite all the politics around it, the science is back in focus. Of course, there is always good, bad, ugly side to it. Media is full of news about the science behind the vaccination, the coronavirus, and you should be happy at least that science is getting rather very good attention, in my view. Just to give some examples, we had never heard of people, showcasing that they have been vaccinated. Today we see people proudly showing off their photos on Instagram and Facebook, that they have been vaccinated. In fact, a new word also has been coined called vexes, just like selfies. So science, including disinformation, is back in our conversation. So I would say that science, especially eScience, is bringing about the idea of collaboration, the idea of network science together. Sometimes, when you think of it, the theme of the conference, let me start with the quote by Dr. John Taylor, none other than the person who started the eScience program in the UK. He said, eScience is about global collaboration in key areas of science and the next generation of infrastructure that will enable it. According to me, this definition of eScience encapsulates two key elements of eScience: the global scientific collaboration, and secondly, the cyber infrastructure required to facilitate such a collaboration. digital libraries, we consider digital libraries to be a key component of that cyber infrastructure. I'll come back to digital libraries and cyber infrastructure in a moment. eScience and digital libraries share the common goal of developing an efficient information management processes and practices for scientific discoveries. But if you think of it, I would go back to the well-known writer, novelist, teacher, historian, and journalist who was also considered a prominent, forward-looking, even prophetic social critic. I'm sure many of you from the LIS profession would have heard of this name, H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells came up with this idea of world brain way back in 1938. And I quote, "Those innovators who may be dreamers today, but who hope to become very active organizers tomorrow, project a unified, if not a centralized world organ to pull the mind of the world together, which will be not so much a rival to the universities as a supplementary and coordinating addition to their educational activities on a planetary scale." Don't you think that this captures the essence of eScience in a way? People have been talking about, cognitive sciences, cognitive neurosciences, etc. In a way, this is nothing but, his words, pull the minds of the world together, is nothing but the cyber infrastructure that we are talking about today. So in essence, the bedrock of eScience is that cyber infrastructure that can integrate the devices, the data sets, as well as the people and the data management systems, including data management processes such as mining, extraction, curation, and analysis of big data from distributed systems. Basically, eScience is also about the ability to share research data, information, and insights to help discover patterns and trends and advancing science. That is the essence of eScience. In a way, eScience also focuses on data stewardship. According to me, when we were talking about the theme of the conference, that we were deciding on the theme of the conference, I was in fact thinking, I discussed this with Satya also, that to some extent, while eScience was the hyped term in the first decade of the 21st century, somehow like fashions, it lost some of its hype by the second decade of the 21st century. So I was telling Satya, should we be focusing on a theme or a topic which is no longer in fashion? But then we decided that it is time that we focus on eScience for India, or refocus on eScience, because in a way I would look at it as bringing past forward, because open science is, according to me, nothing but the journey of eScience to open science. So generally, open science is viewed as an umbrella term that involves various movements aiming to remove the barriers for sharing any kind of output, resources, methods, or tools at any stage of research process, including open access to publications, open research data, open source software, open collaboration, open peer review, open notebooks, open educational resources, everything. We are talking about this openness in everything relating to scholarship, including even research crowdfunding. So in one sense, people think that the first revolution in opening science began with the emergence of scholarly journals in the 17th century, when science, as many of you know, moved forward from the anagram-based scholarly communication. Because people couldn't understand, even the scientists couldn't, those who could actually understand anagram, only then they could move forward there. So there is a natural alliance between science and scholarly communication, as evidenced by the fact that modern science is said to have had its beginnings along with the birth of scientific journal in the 17th century, to be precise, 1665. So essentially, we are talking about science and scholarly communication, their relationship, their natural alliances, which are leading to the open science, as it has become the most commonly used concept today, including in our science, technology and innovation program of the DST. So for us, in a way, if you look at open science, it is all about fully realizing the norms of the Republic of Science, which was very nicely summarized with the mnemonic Kudos by Martin. Kudos stands for communalism, universalism, disinterestedness, originality, and skepticism through open science. So that should be the credo of science and scientists. I will just highlight one aspect or one incident from the history of science to focus on the importance of eScience, importance of knowledge discovery through data mining. Brahe's assistant, Kepler, took actually Brahe's catalog of systematic astronomical observations and discovered the laws of planetary motion. And this is actually a forgotten incident in science history. And this highlights the division between the mining and analysis of captured and carefully archived experimental data and the creation of theories, which is essentially what eScience aims to do. How do you bridge this gap between already accumulated, whether individually or in an aggregated manner, the observed data of whether sciences or social sciences, etc., to help discover patterns and then come up with theories. So in that sense, building the infrastructure to bridge this division is the vision of eScience. When we talk about cyber infrastructure, in a way, for those of us who have been working in the field of digital libraries for the last 25 years, eScience, or the American, I would call it as the American parallel to eScience, the cyber infrastructure, are natural next steps in the evolution of the internet, the web, etc., which is all about connecting devices, people, and entities of scientific knowledge, everything for the purpose of scientific progress and societal well-being. That is what cyber infrastructure is all about. In a way, having been part of the International Digital Library community, especially the JCDL, the ECDL, and ICADL, I am very familiar with the National Science Foundation Blue Ribbon Report by Dan Atkins, which first introduced the idea or the term cyber infrastructure. In fact, Dan Atkins is a good friend of mine, and also he happens to be the Dean of Michigan High School. What I'm trying to draw connections here is between digital libraries, the high school's focus of research, as well as eScience and cyber infrastructure and similar such concepts that we are talking about, and that are the theme of this conference or conclave here. So the field of digital library itself has moved forward in many respects. It has metamorphosed into various things, and we have tried to capture that in various ways. And this capturing of the various connections between eScience and digital libraries or the collaborations, etc., you can see them through the various programs that the LTC 2021 has been able to so far achieve and going to achieve from today onwards for the next 4 days. The LTC 2021, as Meera and others already mentioned, we have already done a series of pre-conclave program. Here is an overview of the pre-conclave program, which will give you a sense of the theme of the conclave itself. We began with, in fact, a curtain raiser lecture on November 6th on eScience in the Fourth Paradigm by Professor Samir Brahmachari, none other than the former Director General of CSIR. And then we had a second lecture on digital libraries and research data management by Professor Prasenjit Mitra of Pennsylvania State University. And then the third one was on data science, the good, the bad, and the ugly by Jayant Haritsa of Indian Institute of Science. And we also ran 2 pre-conclave workshops, one on AI for eScience by Dr. Mandar Mutalik Desai of IBM, and another on semantic search, the current frontier of search technology. So these were the 5 pre-conclave events that we have so far been able to arrange and accomplish, I would say. Now we come to the conclave program. This is again another image that gives you a sense of the overview of the conclave programs. In fact, in database community, inverted tree is a usual metaphor that is used. I decided to use a tree structure to give you an overview of the program of the conclave, that is digital libraries and eScience. So we are having 6. I'm going to run through them. So these are the 6 technical sessions that we are going to have. You're already familiar with that. And then each one of these, the next 3 days, we are going to have technical session number 1 is on eScience and the 4th paradigm. The keynote will be given by Dr. Ram Ramaswamy. The panelists are Harshal, Dr. George Buchanan, and then Vijay Sarathi, and it will be moderated by Professor Murkabi. And then the second session is on open science and scholarly communication. We have Rob Johnson giving the keynote, and we have panelists, Ms. Kushma, and then Mr. Madan Mattu, and then Sridhar Gautam. This will be anchored by Dr. Anand Bhairapa, Indian Institute of Science. Technical session 3, that is about cyber infrastructure and big data analytics. This keynote speaker, that Dr. Vasant Hanavar, is also from Penn State University. He will be actually late night show for him because day after tomorrow morning, he will be giving the keynote address. Sorry, I jumped. Then we also have in this session panelists, Mr. S.R. Narayanan, who is the Chief Data Officer living in Singapore. And then we also have Professor E. Peng Lin with the Singapore Management University. And another panelist is Dr. L. Venkat Subramaniam of IBM. And this session will be anchored by Dr. Srinivas Bogle of 4th Paradigm Institute. Technical session 4, we have keynote speaker, Dr. Sinjia Darayo, who is the professor at the Department of Computer Control and Management Engineering at the University in Rome. And we have panelists, Dr. Asta Madan, Dr. Max Deckers, and Dr. Juan Meme, and this session will be anchored by Dr. Sai Baba. Then the technical session 5, that is on social media and research, the keynote will be given by Dr. Abhinanda Sarkar, who is currently an adjunct faculty at the Indian Institute of Science, Bengaluru, and formerly was the professor and Associate Dean of Research at Myra School of Business. And we also have panelists Dr. Mayank Singh from IIT Gandhinagar, and Vasudev Verma, professor at IIIT Hyderabad, and Mr. Ravi Padki, who is the Chief Digital Officer at Duraflex World Bangalore, and I will be moderating the session. Technical session 6, which is on health informatics. As you have seen, all the other 5 technical sessions were on the different sub-themes or sub-aspects of the theme of the conference, whereas this final session is on a domain-specific application area, that is the health informatics. And we have Dr. Raza Abidi, who is a professor from Dalhousie University, Canada, who will be giving the keynote address. And we have panelists, Dr. Tanga Prabhu, Dr. Sudeshna Adak, and then Dr. Sanjay Sood, who will be panelists, and then it will be anchored by Ms. Rani Desai. So essentially, in the last session, I would say, all these different aspects are going to be covered in the domain of health in the 6th session. Now we come to the today's session, that is the inaugural session, the conclave, which has already been inaugurated. See, basically, when Satya and I were thinking of this conclave and then the inauguration of this conclave, as Satya mentioned earlier, one name that came to our mind was Professor Tony Hay. We said we should have him. That was our desire. At one time, I even thought, aren't we aiming too high to expect Professor Tony Hay to be able to be with us and deliver the keynote address? But one thing that I have learned, but my mother has told me, or rather taught me, is try your best. Or in Hindi, as they say, no, pushne mein kya? Try, ask. So I said, let me ask. So I sent a mail to Professor Tony Hay, and then, as we say, the rest is history. So he is here with us today, and then we are all eager to listen to Tony Hay give the conclave keynote address. So before I conclude, I just want to mention here the theme of the conference once again, and then our aim, and end with this, what we are expecting from this conclave. Well, I would say this to my friends and colleagues in the library and information science community, that past or legacy can either be a scaffolding for greater heights, or it could also be the shackles that will hinder us. I believe it is for us to strengthen the scaffolding of data information management legacy that we have inherited from the past to help scholarship. To my friends and colleagues in the science community and the data science community, I seek them out to strengthen the LIS community in their efforts to build this scaffolding through collaboration and co-creation. That is the aim of building communities for collaboration, the subtitle of the conference theme. So over to you, Professor Tony Hay. Thank you for accepting our invitation and to be with us. Participants, enjoy the conclave.
Thank you, madam, for giving a very nice overview of the conclave. Now we have a product presentation by Informatics India Limited. During COVID times, Informatics has developed a new product in response to the needs of the hour. I call upon Mr. Sanjay Grover, CEO of Informatics India Limited, to launch the product.
Thank you, Dr. Meera. And sorry, Shalini and Professor Tony, I'm suddenly coming in between your introduction and your lecture. In fact, this is the last moment. This was supposed to have been taken up by Satya in his inaugural welcome address, but then we wanted to be more conservative on time. So we thought we'll take 2 minutes from your talk and share this product launch. In fact, during COVID times, which has been a very hard time for us as well as all of you, we thought of developing a product. We were earlier selling an international product to libraries for off-campus access. And off-campus access during COVID times and during lockdown has been a critical aspect of learning and education. So we took the message from our Prime Minister, who said, go vocal for local and become an Atmanirbhar Bharat, that is a self-sustainable Bharat. So we took the message from our Prime Minister and started developing this product. And I'm happy to share that within 6 months, our team developed this remote access product, which I am going to showcase to you in a small multimedia. I'll just share my screen with all of you. So this is a remote authentication system. In fact, I'm taking the privilege of doing the remote launch myself because I'm situated remotely and the entire application is on my desk. So I'm taking this privilege of doing it myself. So the name of our product is Remote Log. And I'll showcase a small multimedia to So thank you very much for witnessing this launch. And now I solicit the support of all the delegates to promote this product in India as well as internationally. Thank you very much. Over to you, Meera, Dr. Meera.
So thank you, Sanjay. Congratulations to Informatics on launching a new product for off-campus information access and retrieval anywhere and anytime. Now time has come for us to hear the keynote address. The much awaited Conclave keynote address will start right now by Dr. Tony Hay, Chief Data Scientist, Science and Technology Facilities Council, UK Research and Innovation. Dr. Hay, the audience, including me, we are looking forward to learn the story of eScience as you are involved with its development from the early days of its evolution. I invite you to share your thoughts with us. Over to you.
Great. Well, it's wonderful to be here. And I'm very grateful for all the kind words that have been said. Let me just clear my screen a bit. Okay, so what I'd like to talk about today is what I'm doing now. And it is related absolutely to the fourth paradigm, eScience and open science. So I'm very surprised and amazed that people have taken up so enthusiastically the ideas of John Taylor for eScience, the fourth paradigm, and open access. Open access is not what I'm going to talk about today, but it is something that I care about quite a lot. And one of my acts as head of department of my department of electronics and computer science was to appoint a certain Stephen Harned, who was one of the prophets of open access. So I was very much heartened by Professor Raghavan's talk on open access, and I think it's a very important thing, but I'm going to leave that topic and move towards the data topics, and I think that's a key area for libraries. And I should explain that although I'm not a librarian, I'm married to a librarian, and she's also been involved in the University of Washington in Seattle with their iSchool. So I have been kept in touch, and I feel libraries are particularly important for the universities and research institutes, and I'd like to make sure that they retain a central role in the process of research, and that's what I'm going to talk about a bit. But first of all, let me talk about what's happened very recently. So AI for science. AI, I mean machine learning, all the other technologies. So it's a catch-all. It isn't just artificial intelligence, it's machine learning, which is a subset of artificial intelligence. It's deep learning, which is a subset of machine learning, and so on. So all of these things come together. I call it AI for science. So what's happened in the last 5 or 6 years? Well, what's happened is a true revolution in artificial intelligence and machine learning. It's called the deep learning revolution. And it started, we've been doing machine learning for many years, and we have many methods, and I've listed some of them on this slide. And one of them I've highlighted in red because of the work of Professor Fei Li at Stanford University with her ImageNet project. And this project was to get a large number of images, you can see them here, and have them labeled by people using Mechanical Turk, labeling this is a dog, this is a cat, this is a bird, and what type of bird it is, and so on. So they had detailed labels on all of these images. And what was discovered was that we have well-known neural networks have been around for many years. Typically, they have an input layer and an output layer, and 1 or 2 intermediate layers called hidden layers. And what was discovered by using this huge array of labeled images was that you could really make progress because of the scale of the data and the scale of the computing, and you could actually train multiple layers in the middle. And so that really was a true breakthrough. And it's illustrated by this slide, where you see on the left some of the pictures in the ImageNet categories. So you have 1,000 categories and 1 million images, and they're quite detailed. For example, different types of bird, different types of cat, and they're labeled. And when they started the competition, which was a challenge to the computer vision community in computer science, what happened was that the computer vision systems did not do very well at identifying these. But as you see, they got slightly better until a dramatic thing happened in 2012, when there was a sudden dramatic drop of about 10% improvement in the system. And that was because they started doing multiple hidden layers using neural networks to do the job of recognizing. And as you see on the image on the right, that's got much better, and human error rates are around 5%. And the latest networks, before the competition was closed and stopped because they'd solved it, they can now get around human level recognition rates with their neural network systems, which have a huge number of layers. So they have not just 1 or 2 layers, they have now over 100 layers in some of the systems, and they can get down to really impressive levels of recognition. So they've really done, I would say, better or equal to humans in classifying these images. And that was really a breakthrough, and one of the major things. This is a slide illustrating why deep learning is rather important, and why it's important with the data. As the data really gets large, you see the strength of the neural network. Older learning algorithms, as you increase the data, they actually saturate. But deep learning, as you increase the data and the computation, it gets better as you go on. And so this is obviously some sort of marketing slide, because there are no units on the axes, but you see that deep learning is distinguished from the other algorithms for doing certain types of things. And if I look at the sort of things that they've accomplished, this is what the industry, this is Microsoft, this is Google, Facebook, all these major IT companies, they've now achieved near human level image classification, speech recognition, handwriting, they've done machine translation, text to speech conversion, and all these sort of things. And these image recognition will enable, near human level driving. So you'll have driverless vehicles of various types. You can also now have solved one of Google's subsidiaries called DeepMind can now play Go better than the best Go players in the world. So that's a remarkable achievement using deep learning. And also for image analysis for things like cancer in health informatics, they now get as good a result as if you have an expert looking at the image. So remarkable achievements, all these achievements based on deep learning. And that's why everybody's so excited about AI, because deep learning has made really, truly interesting breakthroughs. But all of these, of course, are what the IT companies are interested. What I'm interested is in AI for science. So let me talk a little bit then about the fourth paradigm in eScience. And I think they're both about large amounts of data from science and data-intensive scientific discovery. And the book was published in 2009, and it's surprised myself in its wide dissemination and impact. So I'm grateful for the recognition in India, and I'm sure I will learn a lot from this conference. So I'll give you my personal views of these things. So we're all familiar, this is an old slide, because I was doing eScience in the early part, 2001 to 2005. And at this stage, this was big data. but actually, of course, we've got much bigger now. But nonetheless, there was a tidal wave of scientific data on its way, and that was clearly going to be an important driver. And my colleague Jim Gray in Microsoft used to say that some scientists he went to work with, they were drowning in data. How do they manage a petabyte? How do they analyze it, and so on? And so he really believed that there was a new way of doing science. We know about experimental science since the Egyptians and so on, looking and describing natural phenomena. And then with Newton and Maxwell and Kepler, of course, theoretical science came about. So you could do science by doing predictions and testing them experimentally, and from experiment you get new facts, and then you can actually try and fit them into new theories. So that was the way we'd always done science. But in the 1950s, we invented digital computers, and we were able to simulate things that we couldn't do experiments, like galaxy formation, like climate change, and so on. So these are things that you can't do any other way but play with a computer simulation. And that required people with different skills, knowing how to program, knowing how to do algorithms, knowing how to do numerical methods. But today, one of the major challenges is that the scientists now have data sets which are huge and difficult to manage and difficult to extract. What are the important areas? What are the interesting results that you've got in your data set? And they come from all sorts of things, instruments, large and small. So things like the Large Hadron Collider in CERN in Geneva produces petabytes of data per year. And similarly, the big synchrotrons that I'll talk about, they produce petabytes a year too. And there are now, petabyte is now becoming a fairly common amount of data that you receive with these big experimental systems. And for me, eScience, John Taylor gave the, as Professor Urs has discussed, John Taylor gave a definition, and he gave that, gave the program for me to run. And so I had to develop John's ideas into what we meant. And it's what I would now categorize it. It's putting the set of tools and technologies to support collaboration and managing data and things. So it's very similar to what Shalini talked about in her talk. It's a bedrock of the way we're going to do science in the future. So I think they're all important, and data-intensive science is, I think, a genuine new discipline which actually requires new skills, managing data sets and understanding data mining, understanding data visualization, and so on. So that's how I now describe eScience and the fourth paradigm. But I'm quite happy that other people take a different view, because I think that's healthy, and I will learn from the way other people have taken these ideas and developed them further. So this is where I work now. And the reason I work here is because the systems, for example, the diamond light source is a synchrotron which produces X-rays, and that produces petabytes of data, terabytes typically, but now with the upgrades, it's going to produce upgrades not only in the machine, but also in the detector technology, where the data rates, collection rates are increasing faster than Moore's law. We're having huge challenges in dealing with the data sets we create there. And similarly with the electron microscopy facility, there was a Nobel Prize for cryo-EM microscopy, and that also generates petabytes of data. We have also a neutron source. Typically they have smaller data sets, terabytes and so on, and a central laser facility. And we also have, in the building where I work, we have the LHC particle physics data shipped from CERN, transferring petabytes of particle physics data from the LHC in Geneva to us to distribute to the universities. And we also have an environmental data center which archives much of the data that's used for example, for climate change predictions and satellite imagery and so on. So they have petabytes of data on what's called Jasmine. So what we've set up in response to the challenges we have is a scientific machine learning group. We call it SciML at the lab. And our vision is to try and apply methods to the data being produced in all sorts of fields of science, material science, environmental sciences, particle physics and astronomy, of course, but also the life sciences. And so these are it's a very broad possible areas of activity. And I'll just give you a few slides showing the sort of things we've been doing. I won't go through them in detail, but I'll make sure you can certainly have a copy of these slides after the talk. So our focus areas for scientific machine learning are three. One is the use AI to understand experimental results. And that's sort of, you have the data and then you want to analyze the data, and the modern methods and deep learning and so on can help you get science and recognize patterns and recognize new effects in the data. The other one is the actual facilities themselves. You can actually use machine learning to make the facilities more efficient, to make them actually more automated, to make them generate data better and quicker and generally look at failure rates and understand how you can avoid failure. And lastly, we believe that using AI in scientific examples like these, we can actually advance artificial intelligence methods themselves. So in the science landscape, we've looked at cryo-electron microscopy, neutron data, analysis of satellites and clouds. It's called cloud masking. The way that cells migrate and circuit and create them. It's cell migration when you generate new cells. And then you can also, in improving the experimental data, you can use denoising techniques to make the data better. So you can get better results by using modern machine learning and deep learning techniques. We can also improve the way facilities operate. Just to give some example, you can actually control, as you do X-ray of your sample, you can understand what's happening and you can move the sample. You can do on the fly data-driven control. Similarly with neutrons, you want to know whether it's a gamma ray or a neutron. You can actually determine on the shape of the pulse, and that's what machine learning enables you to do. And we're looking also with the laser facilities. When you have big lasers, you can actually, they destroy some of the optics. If you can assess the damages more early, you can stop and change parts before they become very seriously damaged. So all of these things are useful things for experimentalists. And the last area where we hope to learn more about AI, if we can find out how these AI and machine learning methods work on different types of problems, and where they work well and where they don't work so well, we can understand how we can improve them. For example, if you're doing machine learning for science, incorporating scientific knowledge into the computer science algorithm. Can you have a neural network which incorporates the constraints of biology and chemistry and mathematics? Those are the challenges that we have. And what we're looking at that, therefore, is producing a whole set of, I would call them curated data sets. So curated data sets from all of these areas, and we're going to use them. The release is going to be next week, our first official release. We've had a preliminary one, and the idea is to release this so you can go and use this data, and you can actually go and see how your algorithm does with different systems and how you might improve it. So this is the challenge that we hope to learn more about, what AI does well and where it needs improvement. Okay, so that's what I'm doing now. And again, it's all about data. It's all about scientists with large amounts of data. And what I want to talk about is pick up some of the other topics of the conference, talk about open science. So I'm not going to talk about open access, other than to say what I think is one of the seminal events in the last decade, which was in 2013, where the US White House issued a directive to the US funding agencies like National Science Foundation, Department of Energy, to develop a plan to support increased public access to the results of research funded by the federal government. And this was significant in that the results are not just the published paper, the actual memo defined digital data. And this was the recorded factual information necessary to validate research findings, data sets to support the publications, and so on. So it was really pointed out to the fact that public access to the results means not only the research paper itself, but also the data supported. So this was actually, the agencies had to think about how they were going to not only get open access, but also how they were going to link that to the data, and you can get the data sets on which the paper was based. So that, I think, was a very important, it's taken time to get moving, but I think it's going to be a major challenge. And I was very interested in Professor Raghavan's analysis for open access in India, something I've cared about for some time, and it's an important area, how we get open access. But I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the data. And in principle, in 2016, a group which Microsoft was one of the funders of their original meeting, was at the FAIR principles. And this is so generic. You want your data to be findable, you want it to be accessible, you want it to be interoperable so that you can actually use it and work with, bring data sets together. And lastly, if you've made all this data and curated it and put it in a database or an archive, a digital library, you want it to be reusable. So these are the challenges. FAIR principles sounds really good, but we need to figure out exactly what we mean by that. And I'd like to just say a few things about this. I'm not going to talk about it in detail. There's more information on the slides than I'm going to go through in detail. So let me just quickly run through some of the things that I think are important. So this is data discoverable and usable at scale, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And this is where it was published, scientific data. Susanna Sansoni is one of the editors on the editorial board of Scientific Data. Set of principles to enhance the value of all digital resources and its reuse by humans and machines. They're very insistent that you can make these machine readable, so the machines can find the data and then understand it well enough to interoperate with other data sets. And that's a key thing. So I'm really going to focus on the I of FAIR. Findability, I'm not going to go through this slide in detail. Metadata catalogs are clearly important, and EOSC is the European Open Science Cloud project, and there are two other projects that are relevant for the data I'm discussing. One is EXPANS, where PAN stands for photon and neutron data, and the PANOS, which is the Photon and Neutron Open Science Cloud. So these are some of the projects looking at things like findability, metadata catalogs. Accessibility, you need to have authentication, authorization, a DOI for data sets and so on. And that's, again, an important area where you can spend a lot of time. What I'm going to do more is focus on this one, which is rather, in my view, less defined, because as you can see on this list on the left, data meaning and context requires semantics, and you need vocabularies or ontologies, and how do you use these to make the data machine interpretable? And that's what people are caring about here, and I'll say more about that later. And lastly, reusability. So you need the provenance, you need descriptions, you need standards, all of those things, and facilities and institutional policies are obviously important. So those things are important, but I'm not going to go through them in detail. So you've got your data set, you've got some metadata. Is it fair? And so now there are people actually trying to evaluate how fair your data is. I'll just pick out one of these things. This is reusable fair implementation profiles, and they want to see if they can publish what they call FIPs, fair implementation profiles, to accelerate convergence. But just picking out one sentence from this paper, principle I1, that's interoperability, requests that a formal, accessible, shared, and broadly applicable language for knowledge representation be used to embed machine actionable semantics. All right. And so they suggest technologies such as the semantic web technologies of RDF and OWL, but also the other languages possible, Rule ML and Psych. But it doesn't actually tell you have to use a particular one, but it does talk about the machine actionable semantics. And at the moment, I think these are beyond the interest of most scientists. Biologists have made a great start in some of these things with RDF and OWL and Sparkle, but most people don't use those. So I think there's a challenge here, what I actually means. Just to give an example, this is on the right, Professor Simon Coles at Southampton. He runs a national service of crystallography of small molecules. And so they produce large amounts of data, and he works with large numbers of researchers across the UK and elsewhere. And these are his comments that I got in 2015. Much of the take-up of ontology, RDF, Sparkle, and OWL in chemistry has been very slow. But in biosciences, it's done very well. But what he would like to state is that they have a well-established format called CIF. It's a format which allows you to do not only high-level discovery, but also you can process it at a rather low level. So he would say that they've really been doing FAIR for 20 years. So he thinks crystallography is a shining example of FAIR. What hasn't happened, he would say, is the reuse by other parts of chemistry and physics. But this is his view of what the I in FAIR is all about. You can do it with using this chemical format CIF. This is, when I was at Microsoft, this was the only standards area that Microsoft and Google agreed in. It's schema.org. And the idea of schema.org is to give a little bit of semantic information. So for example, if you're looking for Casablanca, there are two sites which mention Casablanca on the web. One of them is about the place in North Africa, and the other one is about Humphrey Bogart's movies. And the question is, you'd like to be able to distinguish. And this is a thing which allows you to mark up your websites with a small amount of semantic data. So you know this is about a place and this site is about movies. And you can actually therefore understand what, to some extent, the websites are about. So it gives you a little bit of semantic information. And that's been built on by the biology community. Carol Goebel and Rafael Jimenez in the Elixir project. They've actually decided to, what schema.org allows you to do is to add your own terms to it. So they've added in their bioschemas a vocabulary that's useful for them in biology. And so bioschemas for genetic types and biological types, these can be added. And furthermore, instead of having to use exotic technologies from computer science like Sparkle or OWL and so on, you can actually use a much more familiar technology with JSON, and JSON linked data actually enables you to put these things into practice much easier, such that you can actually now, with bioschemas, they've worked with Google's dataset search tool to make sure that using their bioschemas, their data can be picked up by Google's dataset search. So they've worked with the dataset search people and schema.org extended with the biology bioschemas to make sure you can actually find all their data sets. And that seems to me, yes, you don't get all the semantic information, but you do get some semantic information. And of course, it's never going to be perfect, but you get a fair amount. So I think this is a very practical way forward. And this is what Rafael Jimenez said in 2015. Just to read a bit of it, he's a supporter of RDF, but it's been difficult, idealistic, and for a small community of semantic geeks, JSON LD has easier, practical, and wider technical audience. So we should hope for all our data to describe and expose all their metadata. It's important to set priorities and provide guidelines to start exposing at least the minimum metadata that will help machines and people find data. So it's a step on the road, and it's stepping back from doing everything using semantic web technologies. Okay, so those are some of my concerns about the I, that there are really some really big semantic issues you have to worry about. What about the progress towards fair data? Are we making progress? Well, European projects, there are a large number of European projects. I've talked about EOSC, the European Open Science Cloud. I talk about PANOSC, which is the Photon and Neutron Open Science Cloud. And there are other projects that are important in this space. What we're doing at the Rutherford Lab is working with the Diamond Synchrotron and Susanna Sansone in Oxford and Steve Collins, who runs one of the beamlines at the synchrotron, to see if they can actually make the human and machine agents gain access to data coming from the synchrotron in a way that's complete, has the provenance and has semantics. So the idea is to see if we can really do that. And in 2022, Diamond has a policy that they're going to make all their experimental data publicly available. So we'd like to understand what you need to do to curate it, to make it fair, and so on. So this is an experiment and exploration, and it's just starting. And if you invite me back in a few years' time, or invite Steve Collins or Susanna, they can tell you how it went. One of the NSF projects on data was called Data One. It was the only major data project that continued for the full 5 years. And it was originally about ecology, enabling new science and knowledge creation through universal access to data about life on Earth and the environment that sustains it. So it has now a way of bringing data sets together. You can search across multiple data sets run by other people. You don't actually have to have created it in one place, but it's a distributed service. You have data sets in different archives and you can put them together as appropriate. And so what they've done is they have, this is a summary from their website, about 800,000 data sets. Obviously not very large because they're only 80 terabytes, and now we have petabytes of data, but nonetheless, these collection of small data sets, they have a tool which is called a Data One Fair assessment tool. And so they have tried to measure with these data sets how fair they are, and they have a metric, and this is their average score they've got. Findability 75%, accessible 39%, interoperable 63%, reusable 49%. Now, I suspect the purists would not be happy with interoperability in the way that they've defined it for their tool. But this is a point we're going to have to grapple with, because fair sounds so good. All the agencies are saying your data needs to be fair. We need to define what fair means. This is what the astronomers have done. They certainly haven't used FAIR very much, but they have got the International Virtual Observatory Alliance, which has set up standards. And these standards have really revolutionized the way astronomers deal with their data and how they can share it and make them interoperable. So data from different telescopes can be actually combined and used. And so this is a key area for astronomers rather than FAIR. FAIR is recognized, but they haven't really done very much on these sort of semantic issues. So the conclusion I have is that, and this is from Susanna Sansone, who was one of the original authors of the FAIR principles, that the FAIR principles are, at the moment, they're aspirational. It's not a standard, but it's a set of guiding principles that provide for a continuum of increasing usability via many different implementations. And that means that I think the library community and the community we have in India can play a major role in understanding what works, what doesn't work, where we need improvement, and working with your data sets that you've got curated in your archives and digital libraries. I think it's an important and interesting area. So that's all I want to say about FAIR, but I thought I should say something about my feelings about the role of research libraries. Because I'm married to a librarian perhaps, but I do care very much about libraries, and I've been concerned that libraries used to be the focus of a university. It was the heart of a university. You couldn't conceive of a university without a physical library. Well, nowadays, You can conceive of a university without a physical library. You can do things online. Your journals are all online. You could, for example, in the UK, you do not need to have huge numbers of volumes of 1930s, 40s and 50s issues of physical review or chemical review, because there are digital versions in the British Library, for example. And so you can access those rather than having to have the physical volume locally. You can have the physical volume in a few places and you use electronic volumes. So libraries have to change. And so in my team at Microsoft, I had a couple of librarians and one of them I'll tell you about in a moment. But this, I went yesterday to our university library. I live in Southampton, and this is what you see. On the wall, you see in the library, there's lattes cafe bar, and you get lots of people coming in to use Wi-Fi, to do coffee and things like this. And that's fine, it gets people in the library, but that's not what a library is for. And on the right, you see a recent addition to the library, and it has these racks and racks and racks of ancient volumes of books and journals, which are, I would say, are never consulted, but that's probably a slight exaggeration. Maybe some of these, this is only a small fraction of the ones in this particular extension. And it really is not the vision of a library of the future. This is a library of the past. So this is where I see things. You have now lots of services you can get from the cloud. You have lots of services you can do online, visualization, blogs, instant messaging, compute services, knowledge management, document stores, scholarly communications, all of these things electronically. Where on a university is the library? What is the role for research libraries? And that's the thing that has concerned me for some years. I have to say, I have not succeeded in doing that at my own laboratory, the Rutherford Appleton Laboratory. We are not in the forefront of this. We should be, but we're not. So I'm still working on this, but this is what I think is one of the roles for the research library. This was a slide for the librarian Lee Dirks, who worked for me. Unfortunately, he died in a car crash, but this is, he introduced me to many things, and this is a slide he liked using. Commercial entities like Google and Microsoft and others are now in the library space, whether you like it or not, because they can find articles and you don't need to go to the librarian to find an article on archive or whatever. I was Dean of Engineering at Southampton, and my students rarely went to the library for library purposes. They went there for Wi-Fi, for coffee, a meeting place. Surprisingly, Margaret Hodge, Britain's former culture minister, this is what she said: sleepwalking into the era of the iPhone, the ebook and Xbox without a strategy, she suggested, runs the risk of turning the library service into a curiosity of history, such as telex machines or typewriters. And General Shinseki was a general, obviously, in the US Army, but he was also in charge of the Veterans Affairs in the States, where they have huge amounts of data. It's the biggest thing to a national health service in the US, the Veterans Affairs. If you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. So have our librarians abdicated? I don't think they have, but I think the ones certainly that I've worked for in the UK have been rather slow. This is a slide from the MIT DSpace project. Mackenzie Smith, who's now librarian in University of California at Davis. Much of the material produced by faculty, such as data sets, experimental results, rich media data, as well as conventional document-based material, is housed on an individual's hard drive or departmental web server. Such material is often lost forever as faculties and departments change over time. So I do think there is a role for doing this. An important role for research libraries should be the guardians of the research output of the institution, to keep what could be important, where you could have, for example, intellectual property. So this is an important role. However, this is what I think is one of the key roles. I also asked Jim Frew, who's a colleague, Environmental Earth scientist at University Santa Barbara, California, Santa Barbara in 2015. And I asked him whether there'd been progress in environmental data curation in the previous 10 years since the eScience initiative. And this is his response. The biggest change is now funding agencies like the NSF insist on a data management plan. So they have a data management plan. You have to put words in your proposal. And he believes that's made scientists possibly pretend to take data curation seriously. I asked him if there are now better curated databases. He said, yes, there are, but there are many more databases. So he wasn't sure that the fraction is increasing. And he came up with what he called his laws of metadata. Scientists don't write metadata, to a first approximation. And secondly, any scientist can be forced to write bad metadata. And so his conclusion was you should automate the creation of metadata as far as possible. But scientists should work with the metadata specialists who used to be these subject librarians in the university, and they can together develop a sensible metadata for their particular data set. So I think the libraries have a role in making scientists curate their data better so they can actually find things, you can actually do things with their data as opposed to just storing it in files with no metadata, which is almost like throwing your data away. So I believe that the libraries of the future, research libraries, need their metadata specialists collaborating with scientists. And if they need more metadata specialists, then they need to retrain and refocus their efforts. So that's my personal view, and I hope that I'll hear a lot more in this conclave. So let's just finish. The transformation of scientific research. So where are we aiming? Why am I doing AI for science? Well, I do believe it has the possibility in the next 10 years to transform much of the way we do research with experimental data. And one of the things that convinces me more about this is Google have a subsidiary in England called DeepMind, and they've been attacking not many scientific problems, but big, important problems. And so the protein folding problem has been around for many years, and they have a competition every 2 years with the people who do protein folding to see if they can predict, if you know the chemical composition of a protein, how will it fold up in three-dimensional space? What will the shape of the molecule be like? And that's what they've been trying to do for 50 years. And AlphaFold, they did originally 3 years ago, but last year, AlphaFold 2 really won 3 years ago, the competition. And last year, it did even better and was really spectacularly improved. And you can see how people reacted. This is John Moult on the left here, stuck with this one problem: how do proteins fold up, for nearly 50 years. To see DeepMind produce a solution for this, having worked personally on this problem for so long and after so many stops and starts, is a very special moment. And then the ex-president of the Royal Society, Venki Ramakrishnan, computational work represents a stunning advance on the protein folding problem, a 50-year-old grand challenge in biology. It has occurred decades before many people in the field would have predicted. It will be exciting to see the many ways in which it will fundamentally change biological research. And lastly, from Genentech, a company, AlphaFold is a once-in-a-generation advance, predicting protein structures with incredible speed and precision. This leap forward demonstrates how computational methods are poised to transform research in biology and hold much promise for accelerating the drug discovery process. So this really is a significant event. It involves huge amounts of data and work and so on, computation, but also deep learning. Deep learning is the AI magic that makes this work, and the computation that you need to go with it. You need large amounts of computation, and that's actually beyond the reach of most universities. So the question is, can we do something which are similar breakthroughs in other areas? And similarly, we also talk about self-driving cars, but actually self-driving laboratories, autonomous control of experimental systems. You can automate the entire experimental workflow. setup and tuning of the experiment, sample selection, measurement, data analysis, and model-driven data interpretation. And then you can also follow up with saying, what experiment should you do next? So there's huge amounts of efficiencies and exciting things you can do by automating various parts of these laboratories. And these self-driving laboratories will, I think, be an important feature of the future. So those are just two examples. The last example comes back to Jim Gray, for whom we actually produced the Fourth Paradigm book. All right. And so his vision was of, you can go from the literature, which obviously he was a big passionate advocate of open access and worked with the National Library of Medicine in the US, which actually was one of the pioneers, and Jim Gray worked with them. And he wanted to go, as they do there, go from the paper in the National Library of Medicine. You can go to the data that produced it. They have lots of databases. You can add your own data and you can put those together, do more research on that and publish a new paper and so on. So go from literature to computation to data back to literature. This was the sort of cycle he thought you could dramatically speed up. And information at your fingertips for everyone, everywhere, huge increase in scientific, what he called information velocity and productivity. So these are the things that I think are within reach. And one of the challenges, of course, you can do more with just the literature. We've talked about semantics on the data, but you can also do semantics on the papers. Can you have AI systems that can actually understand the science in the papers rather than just pick out keywords? So those are many challenges, but I really believe that we're poised in the next 10 years to make dramatic efforts. And my last slide is a serious slide, but will not be welcomed by all scientists. AI will not replace the scientists, but scientists who use AI will replace those who don't. This is adapted from a Microsoft report, but nonetheless, I think this is something that librarians and information scientists also need to think about, because I think you can call those as the generalized scientists. Thank you very much for listening. I better stop.
So, Dr. Hay, we are glad to know that you are son-in-law of library science by way of your marriage. And it's very nice to know that you are able to connect to us much better. And that is very clearly indicated in a couple of your slides, where you have shown your concern towards our profession. Thank you very much for that.
No, I think you have a key role. Yeah, I think research scientists have a key role.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And now coming to your keynote address, thank you very much for an articulate presentation, introducing us to the different aspects and issues associated with eScience, deep learning, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and many other things. You have set the context well for the conclave. Your keynote will be reverberating in all the other sessions, in the forthcoming sessions. I'm sure the delegates of the conclave are waiting to interact with you. So thank you once again. And now we would like to open the question answer session.
There are 3 questions posted here. Before that, there is a, let us take the one who has raised the hand. Dr. Shalini has raised her hand. Madam, could you please ask your question?
Hello, Tony. I have a couple of questions, but I'll stick to one question first. In the early part of your presentation, you gave the example of this ImageNet and deep learning, etc. Stanford. One of the things that generally, there was a controversy also is about the biases in all this, systems of whether it is image or even the other one. And there was this controversy about, how colored people were actually categorized in a different way. So what is your take on that?
My take on that, I gave you the headlines, but I didn't give you many of the things that concern me. One of which, of course, is when you have facial recognition, they do quite well on white people, but they don't do well on different Chinese or Indian or other colored people. So, and that's clearly dangerous, and we are a long way from solving all those problems. But there were also other problems. I mean, you can train a thing to recognize dogs, and then you can sprinkle a bit of noise on that image. So it looks to you and me as nobody's changed it, but now you use the system you've trained to recognize by showing it 1,000 pictures of a dog, and it thinks it's now a toaster. All right, so you can it's a rather fragile system. So I think we need to understand the limitations of these systems, and they're not perfect, and there's a lot of more work to be done. Do they really understand things? What are they picking up? How are they making decisions? So explainable AI is important, as well as the biases that these systems have introduced. And I think those are very real problems.
Thank you.
Yeah, hand is raised by Dr. Sai Baba. Sir, could you please unmute yourself? Yeah.
So, I'm audible now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Tony. Hey, I think your talk made me to really think and go into the future. Thank you for the perspective. But I just started thinking, because you made me to think in the future. Today, we are looking in terms of AI to solve some of the problems which man or humans are trying to solve or take time to solve. And it's exciting. But I was just thinking whether it also would put some limitation when you achieve this. Today, humans would take years and the AI would help you to do it faster. But then what next? What next? And do we foresee certain issues because they're doing it so fast?
Well, I do see certain issues in many areas of AI. One of which that worries me is the fact that AI can reduce the employment. You can automate many jobs, and I think that's a real concern in all countries of the world, because I do believe we need to actually focus on creating meaningful jobs for young people, and that's absolutely vital. So that's a more generic thing. What about science? Well, I talked to someone who was promoting the automatic lab experiments, and he was saying, well, it could be that it's so fast that you run out of ideas of things to do. So I think that we'll see how things go, but I believe there's plenty of understanding of AI methods, what it does well, what it doesn't do well. I think it'll take us quite a time, but I do believe that we will come across all sorts of issues that we haven't thought through. Yeah.
Thank you.
Next one is Dr. Mutkavi. Sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Professor Tony, hey, actually I got cut off when I was introducing my institute. It was actually inspired by your book. I just wanted to repeat that here.
Really impressed to know that. Yes, I was.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the book actually gave the title, and the title gave the name for our institute. Like, right. So thank you very much for that. My question is actually regarding the end of theory. So now I just want to draw a parallel, because when the computational systems arrived, traditional mathematical analysis, I think, kind of took a backstage, because people would directly go to computational systems. Of course, algorithm development required some of the computation and some of the mathematical understanding. But in a similar way, if I'm looking at only data-based approaches, will theory kind of take a backstage? Or at least the new theories will not emerge from the traditional way of constructing these theories. Maybe the AI systems themselves will construct new theories, or what is going to happen?
No, that's an interesting question. Yes. So I actually think I've taken a rather narrow view. I'm just looking at machine learning and AI applied to scientific data sets produced by these facilities, and that's one area. But I would actually recommend it isn't all deep learning, just running these machines. There are other new mathematics that you can bring. And if you want examples of that, I recommend a project at Berkeley National Lab in California. It's called the Camera Project, as in camera. And the AM in that stands for applied mathematics, and they've done some machine learning and things like that for their experiments at the lab, like we're doing. But they've also used all sorts of clever new mathematics and combined it. So I do think that applied maths is important. I think statistics is important. Computer science is important. So I don't think it's all solved or one thing fits all. I think that when we're not seeing the death of theory, and I don't believe that you'll be able just to use Google to find out scientific results. So I think we're a long way from that. Although Google's deep mind for that particular problem with AlphaFold is an impressive example.
Thank you.
Okay, the question here in that question Q&A box is, I love Frew's law of metadata. As you suggested, librarians can contribute to the creation of metadata. The world seems to believe that AI will take over and librarians are not needed. Once the existing librarians retire, who will create the metadata?
Yes, I like Frew's laws of metadata too. No, scientists need to learn how to create metadata. And I do believe there's a real role for people who understand metadata, like librarians, and especially subject librarians that we used to have when I was at university in Southampton. They can work with the scientists to create metadata. Some of that you can create automatically as you take the data, and that's an important element that will happen. But I think there's always need for a collaboration, and I think that the librarians will, with their repositories, with the curated data sets, they'll be the ones who look after this data. So I don't think existing librarians will retire, but you need to educate and renew that, because I think that you can't do these AI things without serious metadata. So AI is not going to take over without the appropriate metadata on the data sets. We're generating new data sets every day, and I think there's a large role that can be done to go and help the scientists in your university or your institute or your experimental facilities understand how to put metadata such that you can use machine learning and AI methods on it. So I think it's beginning, and there's a healthy cycle where people retire, but new ones need to be educated with the right skills. Just like we need now to create data scientists who understand these things, you need librarians who understand how to work with scientists to create the appropriate metadata. So I think there's a key role there. I really do, and I don't think it's going to go away.
Yeah, thank you. Question need to be asked by Mr. Satyanarayana. Could you please unmute yourself, sir?
Yeah, Professor Hay, it's so exciting to hear your talk. I have one question related to interoperability. And most of the time when we talk about interoperability, we generally focus on metadata, the structured data basically. Now, is there any attempt to look at or interoperability between two different ontologies? Is it possible to develop interoperability? Like typically, the Medline uses one set of ontology, chemical abstract uses another set. Both of them index a lot on, let's say, drug discovery. Is it possible to develop interoperability between two ontologies?
I mean, that's a question that's worried me, because I was on the advisory board for Data One, and they were putting distributed archives of different types of data with different ontologies. And yet they were advertising they could search across these, but they can't search across unless they've got a common thing. And so you want something much more powerful than just the basic commonality. And so that, I think, is an important issue. And I think how these interwork, how we do semantics will be extremely important. But I think one has to recognize that most scientists aren't going to be experts in these exotic technologies, and they need to be brought towards that. And I think that's why I favor something like bioschemas, which is actually rather more pragmatic and takes a small step. I don't know how I'm not sufficiently educated to know exactly how different ontologies can be matched together and find the commonality. But I think that's an important area, and there must have been some progress in that area. So no, thank you very much for the invitation to this. And I should also emphasize, I've given you my views of fourth paradigm, eScience, and so on, but there isn't the view. There's your views, and your views are just as valid, and you can show that what I should have been emphasizing is this, and I will be learning, I hope, in the future from what you publish.
Thank you.
There's one question from Dr. Debasis Das. Could you please unmute yourself, sir?
Yeah, hi, good evening. Professor Tony, great insightful talk, and I'm particularly attracted to one of your slides, and where you probably mentioned that metadata can be generated automatically. I belong to the field called healthcare science, and lots of people generate a lot of omics research, transcriptomics, genomics, all other kind of life science data. Now, my question to you is that can the metadata be generated other than the people who are directly related to the work? For example, how would one know whether it is a tissue or it is a cell line, or what condition, what kind of treatment has been given? So metadata is very useful, I agree with you, but can it be created by somebody who is not a part of the experiment or data generator?
Interesting question, yeah. So, yeah, I think I can see how metadata can be generated as you're doing the experiment. So you can automate things. So you record things like the temperature, what the chemical compounds are, and those can be recorded as you do the data. So could someone have the data set and then generate metadata without involving the people who took the data? I would be skeptical, but I'm willing to be educated. But I think it's an interesting question. And I do think we need to have a collaboration between the people who took the data and are the scientists with people who generate the metadata. That's my personal belief, but I may be wrong.
Thank you.
There's a question in the Q&A box from Manish Mankad. How much auto indexing is accurate in metadata creation?
I don't really know enough about that to be able to tell you that an answer I would be confident of. So I'm sorry, I can't. I don't know about auto indexing and stuff. I know you can as you take the experiment, you can record certain aspects of the experimental conditions and so on, and what you're doing, and they can be automated. I don't quite know what you mean here by auto indexing.
One question is there from Raghavendra R. I was amazed to see self-drive laboratory. Does it going to be reality in coming days through, though we synchronized latest technologies minus of human brain and interventions?
Okay, so I think the self-drive laboratory is a vision, all right? It's not my vision, it's a vision of others. I think that you can do a lot. My personal view is that, this is purely personal, AI, the thing is there going to be something as general AI that can actually make its own deductions and do things? I happen to believe with one of my heroes, which is Professor Licklider, who had the idea of the internet. He was a psychologist, and he believed in a human computer symbiosis. So I think actually I see that AI systems working with humans actually being able to go and do make these decisions. I don't think you can put everything on the AI system, but that again, that's a personal view. Other people think that they'll build AI systems that can do everything. I think that's a long way off. I'm actually being forced to think about the fact, could one imagine an AI system that by the year 2050, well, that's sufficiently far off that I can't think that far ahead, but that was the question I was asked, that could win a Nobel Prize. An AI system, could it win a Nobel Prize by 2050? And I have no idea. I think it's highly unlikely, but Who knows?
Sir, one more question in the chat box is there, Q&A box. In the context of eScience, explorations of big data research and scholarly communication, what new roles the librarians are expected to catch up with the shoulder? Must be a subjective question, of course.
No, but it's something I've concerned. What I didn't talk about was open access. So when I was Dean of Engineering, I had to produce an annual report of the faculty research, and I had to search down all the papers that everybody published, and it turned out to be a huge amount of effort. And we didn't have all the journals. By that stage, I got from my librarian, I got a piece of paper saying, what journals would you like to cancel this year? So it was actually true of my staff, 200 staff, 500 students and postdocs. We didn't have the journals that they all published in. We had many of them, but we didn't have them all. So collecting them all together was a pain. And so I asked for the creation of a digital repository for all publications in preprint that you submit to journals. And so that was one of the first repositories for papers. We didn't make it available to the outside world unless it was not a problem with the journal. So this was just to make sure we had a record of everything that our staff did. And that we took up to my old department of computer science with Stephen Harned, and we set up the ePrints server, and we started very early on doing ePrints. And again, that involved the library. My wife was involved with the oceanographers in the library and things like this. So creating repositories is clearly looking after open access, making sure you have a copy of everything your university publishes, or not the grey literature, all sorts of other things. Librarians, that's actually one of their roles that they do extremely well. And for example, the particle physicists publish in Archive. Now that's, they published before it's been refereed. So Archive is an unrefereed pre-publication thing, and publication, if you like, is a stamp of approval by the journal. But you then have lots of different versions. But again, librarians are very good. They know how to deal with these things. And to my surprise, this hasn't caused a great deal of problems. So I see certainly the role of digital libraries and repositories. The library, research library has a central role. And I think also with the metadata curation, I think librarians have a central role. So I would like to see research libraries, not for being, irrelevant to the future of the university or the research institute, as being central again to how the whole institution, library, or the whole institution, the university or the institute should function. And the research library can be at the heart of that process.
Right. I think the next question, I think you must have, whatever answer you have given, maybe related to the same question it is there. How allies professionals can understand or develop his or her cross-disciplinary, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and cross-disciplinary domain knowledge?
That's an interesting challenge. Yes, I think it's difficult. And for example, I've been concerned with scientists who know enough about computer science. Can you have people who know both fields? And it's very difficult. And you have to know enough about one field, and you have to be an expert in one field. Can you be experts in more than one field? That's rather rare. And so I think that requires a great deal of thought. I don't know whether the libraries now you still have subject librarians, and that's what we used to have, and they used to be expert in physics or in chemistry or whatever, and those were the sort of skills that they could work with that community, and they could talk to their colleagues in the library about possible connections. So I think if there aren't subject librarians, maybe there ought to be again subject librarians who specialize and can work with different communities, but maybe they can work with more than one community. But I don't know enough about how the research libraries now are functioning, because I'm at a national lab where we have a library which is very old-fashioned, actually. It really just is concerned with ordering the journals that we afford and getting papers for people, buying books. This is actually not central. We can do all that ourselves. What we need librarians to do is the specialized things that I've talked about.
Mr. Chudamani has raised the hand. Could you please unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm a practitioner of classification. New research comes. How do AI can handle that in processing, classifying?
Okay, so I know what classification means in the context of machine learning, that you can decide whether it's of that type or this type, whether it's a neutron or a photon and things like that. So you can do classification problems like that. Or are you talking about the traditional library classification schemes, about which I know rather little?
Yes, traditional library classification and AI-based classification.
Well, I'm afraid I'm not educated enough to answer that, and you'll have to educate me in the future about exactly how those are linked together. So I'm sorry, I can't answer that one.
Okay.
Maybe I can just add one comment here. There are, methods are, I mean, I'm not saying that they are very good, but methods of, text summarization and classification for documents themselves, which will also help you in this kind of a auto classification. It's not very well developed, but they're there.
Okay,
so it's an extension of the text summarization technology, essentially.
Yeah, no, text summarization I do know a little bit about, because Microsoft have those technologies. So that's interesting. Yes, it is. And a colleague of mine who works at the lab, Jackie Cole from University of Cambridge, she's got a tool which uses natural language processing and can, from scientific papers, get information from the tables they publish and things like that. So she's doing, it's called Chem Data Extractor. So she's doing that type of extraction from papers, but there's also summarization. So there's a collection of things, but I think there's more to be done. And I haven't looked at that part of the whole challenge.
I just want to add a comment here. I think we need to really look into at what stage the classification need is going to be continued. I think with the type of search mechanisms that are becoming available, we need to really address that part of it. Though this may be, it may be a lot of libraries professionals be unhappy with my comment, but I think we need to really look whether up to what time we need to continue with this classification. Can the search mechanism can help us to find out what we're looking under the classification?
Professor Murgavi has raised his hand, sir.
So if I'm permitted, second question, right? Okay. So I just wanted to ask you one question. That is, we do use, of course, observational data for training the AI systems. But now, for example, can I use, let's say, simulated data? For instance, I'm thinking about, aerospace applications where we want to, let's say, develop a new design for an aircraft. But, I may not have all kinds of, data which is coming from flight test, let's say. So I may actually have some simulated data from a variety of, flight scenarios. Does it add any bias? Because, or you think, it can actually lead to new designs using AI techniques?
No, that's something I'm particularly interested in, because one of the things I didn't talk about was I talked about ImageNet, which they painstakingly labeled them by hand, all these images, by getting people to do it, if you like, crowdsourcing. But when you generate experimental data off a machine, it doesn't come with labels. And so what one tries to do, one example is you do a simulation and you train your system on simulated data. Now, that's fine, but on the other hand, if there's something really unexpected, is your system trained to recognize that this is a real signal which you didn't expect? So I think there are issues with simulated data, but that's what people are using. And there are many interesting things you can do with simulation. you can train a system now to emulate what a real simulation involving, the equations of motion and everything else. So you can actually have these surrogate systems which generate data which looks indistinguishable from the ones that take a lot of time solving the differential equations and everything else. You have these things encoded in a neural network. Now, is that sufficient? What happens if there is some new science there? For example, the particle physicists are looking for supersymmetric particles, and no one really knows what they look like. They think they know, but if it's somewhat different, would they find it? And from all this massive data. So there are many issues like that, which I think are not solved. And so I think there's plenty of work for AI researchers and for scientists to look at these issues. And for designing a plane, clearly that's a rather critical thing to do. But there is such a thing as transfer learning. So you can train a system, for example, on ImageNet, so it recognizes things, and then you can use that trained neural network on another type of problem. And that actually does have some success. So transfer learning, where you've trained it on, for example, on astronomy data from the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, and now you can actually use that as a starting point for training on the data you expect from the Large Synoptic Science Telescope, LSST, the Vera Rubin telescope it's now called. So transfer learning has a possibility of doing things. But no, I think those are real problems that I hope our benchmarks can shed some light on. That's why we're doing things like that, to understand the limitations and the strengths of machine learning and AI.
Thank you.
So I would like to thank all the participants for the very interactive question and answer session. And now we have come to the end of the inaugural program LTC 2021. I request Mr. Sanjay Grover, CEO Informatics India Limited, to propose vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Meera. You started by thanking. I said you will complete the vote of thanks. But thank you for giving me an opportunity to have the privilege of thanking all the participants and the key dignitaries on the virtual dais today. Well, all things that begin good come to an end, and all that begins good, begins well, ends well. So we have now come to the final stage of the inaugural program. We conceived LTC 2021. Actually, we feel bad on missing LTC 2020, which was scheduled in October, and we couldn't do it because of the COVID crisis. But we kept the torch ignited, and thanks to the LTC core committee who worked hard to ensure that we see LTC 2021 almost near the same schedule as we had planned earlier. All other LTCs, LTCs have been around 16 to 23rd January, and we were almost near the same time frame. Thank you organizers, thank you participants and delegates who have supported us in making this program a success. Well, now it's time for me and for all of us to log out for today, and we will plan to log in for tomorrow morning once again. But before we log out today, let me thank the key dignitaries who made this inaugural program a great success. Professor Vijay Raghavan set the tone for the LTC conclave, gave us some thought-provoking ideas, inspired us to debate a couple of ideas on. He initiated the discussions on subscriptions, subscription fees, author payment fees, APC fees, what the publishers are planning to collect against the subscription fees. So we should discuss this issue. So thank you, Professor Raghavan, for having set the tone for the library technology conclave. And then it was also interesting to hear Professor Tony Hay, who laid the foundation after Professor Raghavan set the tone. Professor Tony Hay laid the foundation of the discussions that our thematic sessions are going to have in the coming days, especially the eScience and digital library. He discussed on, very interestingly, AI for scientists and how AI for scientists is irreplaceable, and also concluded that, okay, in case if AI for scientists does not exist, then the scientist will automatically get replaced. Thank you for laying this foundation. It was an interesting topic, and we would be discussing more on these topics during the next 6 thematic sessions. Thank you for gracing this occasion. Thank you for your sparing your valuable time and being with us for almost 3.5 hours and interacting with us on this platform. Thank you very much. I would also like to thank on this occasion the collaborating and co-host institutions and their head of those institutions who joined us on this platform. Dr. Shailesh Nayak, Director, National Institute of Advanced Studies, joined us, shared his views, shared his thoughts on the topics of LTC 2021, and gave us an idea what other areas we should debate on. Thank you, Dr. Shailesh Nayak, for gracing this occasion. We were also joined by Dr. Sachidanand, Vice Chancellor, Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, who gave an idea on what are the areas we should debate on health informatics, why health informatics is a key component for debating on a platform like LTC 2021. Thank you, Dr. Sachidanand, for gracing this occasion. Then we were also joined by Dr. Vidyadhar Madhukavi, Director, CSI 4th Paradigm Institute, Bangalore. Yes, he has been a key role player in setting the theme and topics for this program, LTC 2021. He shared his thought process and we welcome his ideas. And thank you very much for having joined us on this occasion. And also thank you for being a member of the core committee to decide on the program content and guiding us, enlightening us on what the core content of our program should be. Thank you very much for gracing this occasion, Dr. Madhukavi. The entire, what we found today that LTC 2021, the inaugural program, was a success. And we are sure the next 3 days are also going to be a grand success. And attributing the forecasted grand success of this program, I would like to thank Dr. Shalini Yars, who is the program chair, who has helped us in creating an exciting program for next 3 days, the 6 thematic sessions, worked hard, effortlessly on gathering almost 40 speakers for different thematic sessions, and actually pulling all of us here to bring confirmations and see, and also ensuring that she gets confirmation on the sessions for the program scheduled on 28th, 29th, and 30th. Thank you, Dr. Shalini, for creating the content for this program. And we are confident this program is going to be a grand success. Supporting Dr. Shalini in creating the program and managing the entire digital event was the LTC 2021 core committee. The core committee people who were involved in core committee also put in equal amount of efforts. I would like to thank Dr. Anand Bhairappa, Dr. Hamsa Kalyani, Dr. M. Sai Baba, Dr. Meera, who is also the anchor to the program, Mr. Satyanarayana, Dr. Madhukavi, who have joined hands together and worked together day and night to create the content, the program schedules, and the roadmap for LTC 2021. Now, most important, the success of this program is attributed to those delegates who join us as attendees and panelists and listen to these content, these debates that we plan to organize for their information. So all the delegates who have joined us on this platform, please do keep us encouraged by joining in the coming days. I think we had more than 350 people continuously attending the program throughout the last 2 to 3 hours. Thank you, all of you. You have spared your valuable time in attending this event, hearing us, and getting more knowledge. And I'm sure the next 3 days are going to be more insightful and more useful for all of you to gain more knowledge on eScience and digital library. Thank you for joining us, and keep us encouraged by joining further on the next 3 days. I would also like to thank my backend team, the team led by Devendra Thakur, who has been able to create this entire digital platform on Zoom, bringing everybody on board, and then ensuring that all of you have an access and all of you are visible, all of you are hearable, and we are able to create a real virtual platform for LTC 2021. Thank you, Devendra. Thank you, Soji. Thank you, the LTC backend team, for making this inaugural function a success. So thank you once again, all of you, to have joined us on this platform. And I'm sure we would meet once again. We'll log in once again tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m. to witness the new eScience thematic sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sanjay.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you. I was very honored to be invited, and I'm very impressed by the audience and the questions. So I hope I learn a lot from your conclave. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Sanjay, for the very kind and generous vote of thanks. And good evening, everyone. Don't get scared. I'm not starting the session again. I have to make few announcements before we actually formally close the event. So there will be 2 technical sessions tomorrow. The first session on the theme eScience, the 4th paradigm in research, will start at 10:30 a.m. with a keynote by Dr. Ram Ramaswamy, Adjunct Professor, IIT Delhi, formerly Professor, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and Vice Chancellor, Central University of Hyderabad. Session will close at 1 p.m. The second session on the theme, Open Science and Scholarly Communication, will begin at 3 p.m. with keynote by Rob Johnson, Founder Director, Research Consulting, Nottingham University, USA. Thank you all for being with us today, and hope to see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.